Well, I wanted to thank you first, Anthony, for taking the time to do this interview with me. I, I don't think a lot of people are really aware of this situation.
Pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to talk about this as it is an important topic. And as you said, it is something that, whether people are aware or not, we need to raise awareness because it is a serious problem for parrots kept as pets.
Absolutely. My first question is, how long have you been an avian vet?
Well, I graduated veterinary school in 2001. So I've always been interested in working with birds, and with that comes working with exotic pets. So I currently specialize in the medicine and surgery of birds, but I also limit my practice to all pets except dogs and cats. So I will treat other so-called exotic pets as well. But I did graduate back in 2001. After that, I went on to complete a one-year internship, and then after that, I completed a 2-year residency. And the residency was focused on the specialty training of birds and exotic pets to go on to pursue board certification.
Wow.
So I am a board certified avian vet through the American Board of Veterinary Practitioners.
Wow, that's a big accomplishment.
Thank you.
So there was something that interested you about birds that got you into it to begin with.
I've always been interested in birds. I mean, I think part of it was growing up with birds. I come from a family where we kept pet birds. We had parakeets and cockatiels and a little bit of wild bird rescue happened through our home. And I think I was probably just passively influenced from that. And I know from a very young age, raising baby birds or allowing them to nest or reproduce in the home. And it was more of just a hobby thing that my parents did, but I think there was some influence in there. But I have always, in a way, been fascinated with birds, and I've always loved them. And when I was planning to attend veterinary school, I had already developed an interest in devoting my career towards less traditional pets like dogs and cats. And so from the time I started veterinary school back in the late 90s, I had wanted to pursue a career working with birds.
That's awesome. So how would you say this industry has changed over the past 20 years, or 10 to 20 years, let's say?
Parrot and the owning of parrots, it's an interesting and it's a very sort of long and detailed explanation, but to summarize it in a more manageable way, we know that people have been fascinated with birds for thousands of years. There was a time where people would keep birds. They didn't know anything about how to keep them, but it was a sign of luxury. It was something that the wealthy could only have. There was a time where if you could send your explorers from Europe to the New World and they could trap parrots and bring them back, you can actually keep them as pets. So man's fascination with the keeping and owning of parrots goes back thousands of years. But we move forward through the ability to keep birds and the availability. So when you ask how the industry has changed, or parrot keeping, or pet birds in general, and what's happened, largely most of it centers around legal changes. In 1992, when they passed the Wild Bird Act and it became illegal to import or bring in wild-caught birds into the USA to use those as pets, what happened then, there was a demand but no supply. And then what happened is aviculture kind of took off at that time, and breeders and people who had birds were now trying to meet the need for people who wanted pet birds but didn't have as much access to them.
I want to ask you, how bad is the parrot problem I know it's more than just feather picking, plucking, mutilation.
Well, on that specific issue, again, feather destructive behaviors, as a behavior problem, there's a couple things to consider. One is some of those are medical disorders. So you do have to differentiate the ones that are medical disorders from those that are truly behavioral disorders. I mean, those are the only two categories it could be. We do know that birds can pull their feathers out for a whole variety of medical reasons, that if you could diagnose and treat, you may be able to end the behavior, or at least stop them from doing that. We do know that birds will sight pick over areas. A classic example is, I had a bird come in recently that was pulling all the feathers out of its leg. It was an older bird. We took some radiographs, some x-rays. The bird had severe arthritis in the knee. Once we put the bird on pain medication and supplements for arthritic changes, the bird stopped because the pain was gone, the sensation was gone. So we sometimes have those situations. There are theories that birds can pick for when they feel something, when they're aware something is off, that the pulling the feathers is an outward expression of something internal. So keep in mind that birds that pull their feathers out because of behavior reasons can only pull out the areas they can reach. So they can't pull out feathers on their head, that type of thing. They can only pull feathers out in the parts of the body they can reach.
Right.
So you'll see them having a full head of feathers in certain other areas because they can't reach those areas.
Have you ever heard of another parrot plucking, let's say two of them are together, but one has this disorder and maybe they both have it? And has there ever been a case like that where they're doing it to each other?
There is normal preening where birds preen each other, clean each other's feathers, will go through the motions of taking care of each other, and that's a normal bonding social behavior. Pulling the feathers out is a whole different story.
Right. And molting is a normal behavior too, when the feathers come out.
Yeah, molting is a normal process of feather turnover. That's a normal physiologic process that every living thing goes through, turnover skin cells or hair or feathers, yeah.
Right. So would you say that these disorders are escalating? So like, where do you see what's going to happen? If we don't do something about this, if people don't start doing something about this, it's going to continue to get worse?
Yeah, it's hard to know because so much of it is theory. There's not definitive science on a lot of this. A lot of it is personal observations. A lot of it are people like me who've been a bird vet over 20 years that have seen so many cases, taken so many histories, learned from a lot of these patients, hearing other people's opinions, what has been published in the scientific literature, what's been written on websites that's somebody's opinion, but somebody read it and thinks it's fact, that type of thing. So there are a lot of theories and a lot of loose endings in some of these.
What advice would you give to someone that's interested in getting a parrot, that's never had one before?
My advice in someone's decision to get birds, because, although it may sound negative, and I do have serious reservations about the type of birds that I think should ever be kept as pets, it's a question I get a lot, and oftentimes it's an even better joke when people say, they come to me as a bird and exotic pet veterinarian and they're like, I want to get another pet, what should I get? I'm going to say a kitten, and they'll say, no, and they assume that I'm going to say some weird, unusual lizard or some kind of exotic bird or something. I'm like, well, if you don't want a kitten, think about a puppy, get a dog. I mean, dogs and cats are still the best pets, and they're the typical prototype of probably what works best for human companionship when you compare it to birds. So the best advice I have is get educated about birds. Understand the limitations. Don't just look for the unicorns and rainbows of having a pet. You need to understand. Ask other people, talk to them, and then really think about starting smaller. Think about smaller birds that don't need as much space, that are fine with others, that get along well with other birds, that might not take as much or demand as much of your time. Birds that are less likely to develop behavior problems. Birds that we can meet their captive needs better than, say, a large parrot. Because no matter how big of a cage you have, it's not enough space. They say that the only proper size cage for a bird is when they don't know they're in one. Or they say no cage is big enough, things like that. But, you have to think about those things. So it's a big commitment to food, to toys. You might spend $25 for a toy and the next day it's shredded at the bottom of the cage. Veterinary care. People generally don't appreciate veterinary care. And we do want people to get veterinary care. I'm biased as a veterinarian. If you have a pet, you need a vet. People don't seem to think that with birds. They think they need a vet when the bird is sick and dying or is having an emergency, and it's like, well, where were you before? Right. We recommend an annual wellness checkup for all pets.
That was my next question, is how often should they?
So they should be coming in at least once a year for a checkup. Let's get a full physical exam, get their current body weight, identify any problems, talk about diet, talk about training, talk about aspects of care. Let us recommend different ways you can, say, make your bird take more baths if they don't like taking baths. Ways you can get them on a better diet. Ways you can get them to eat fruits and vegetables if they don't.
Well, Anthony, this has been great. It's been an honor to just sit here and talk about this. I could talk about this all day, but I know you have a busy schedule.
Happy to help and talk about this, and hopefully we got some good answers and gave you some good information.
Oh,
about
absolutely. I know.
a serious issue facing pet birds today.
So I'm here with Ben, and you pronounce your last name Chikaru? Chikaru?
Kiro.
All right, and he is you're the owner of Valleywide Parrot Rescue, right?
I'm the founder, basically.
Nice.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time to do this interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
How has this industry changed over the past? How long have you been in the industry?
So I've always had birds since I was 3 years old, and it kept evolving, kept growing. At one point, I was into poultry. Another point, I got into parrots, and at one point, I had to leave the country for school, and I had to leave all my birds here, and I didn't know what to do with them. So I go to the pet store, and I basically leave them there. I didn't know what else to do. Then fast forward a few years later, I come back to Arizona, and I was doing a few courses on Google Analytics and stuff like that, and I did a little project where I basically started a bird rescue. I didn't expect anything out of it, right? Just a project just for the class,
Right.
and suddenly I started getting calls, right? One person, another person, and this was around COVID time. And what I didn't realize is that a lot of people were passing away and they had parrots. And now their kids have a parrot, they're stuck with a parrot, they don't know what to do with it, or this person doesn't have any family, right? The police has them, they don't know what to do. And slowly but surely it grew from one bird to what you see here.
Wow. What's the average age? I know it's different for different parrot species. I know some of them can live a long time, like 100 years, but what's the average?
I don't think there is an average.
Right.
It's species to species. You have like parakeets that live 8 to 15 years on average. And then at the same time, you have African greys that can live 60 to 80 years. You know, it's a huge range. But when you look at the bigger birds, the Amazons, macaws, cockatoos, their years are very comparable to human years. You know, a person lives about 70 years, right?
Right.
Same thing with them. So you'll have somebody who adopts the bird in their 30s, right, as a baby. This bird is definitely going to outlive the person. So what happens after that? A lot of people don't realize, and they don't make the proper plan to make sure that their bird is taken care of. And again, I told you stories before. A lot of these birds go not just through a little bit of suffering. Some of them go through years, even decades sometimes, of real torment. And they come out really messed up.
How do you foresee the future of the parrot community and birds and stuff? I mean, is it getting worse with this stuff with fluffing disorders and all that, or is it getting better?
I don't know what it is. I think it's more of an issue that's been pushed off, basically, because most of these parrots that, for example, Scooby, right? He's 36 years old. So when was he really adopted? When did the first mistake happen, basically, with an owner?
Right.
It was 36 years ago. So before, in the 1990s, right? So now this problem's coming back to haunt you, basically, right? Because it's something you adopted in the 90s, and now, you know, people expire after a certain age, right? But the bird keeps living because it has many more years to go. So I don't think it's that the problem got worse. I think it's that the problem is now affecting people because people are starting to pass away who adopted birds all those years ago. It's like the issue with the baby boomers, right?
I was just going to say
exactly like that. It's the issue is skipping a generation, and now it's hitting, you know, the kids of the people whose parents adopted the parrots decades ago, and they don't know what to do.
So you think there's more of that than just people getting a bird that don't really know what they're getting themselves into, and then they're too busy to really get into the attention? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of cases like that.
There is a lot of cases like that, especially like, let's say, there's a bird show in Las Vegas, right?
Right.
You know, the people who are going through this bird show are like, they just want some money in the casino, and they like go like, I want a bird right now.
Right.
Like, is that a smart decision? No, you're like, it's a lifelong commitment. If you get a macaw at a show at Las Vegas, right? it's you adopted a 2-year-old child, basically. Like you cannot just say, oh, this is just something cool I have. It's something that you have to spend hours and hours of your day with. And yeah, that is an issue. But I think more of the issue is really what's going on with the economy right now. A lot of people, especially during COVID time, they lost their jobs. They had to relocate. They had to downsize. I once had a mother. This was one of the first condos we even had. It was a mother. She called me. She gives me the address. I come and it's a hotel. I'm like, I've never been called over to a hotel. It's kind of weird. I go into a hotel. I see it's a one-room hotel. There's 3 kids, the mother, their dog, and this condo. And she says, we lost our home. We're going from hotel to hotel, and we cannot take care of this bird anymore. It's just one situation. We have many, many other stories like this. But yeah, a lot of people lose their homes. A lot of people end up in a situation, financial situation, which they could not foresee. And now they have to make this tough decision. But end of the day, they have to think about what's better for the bird. It doesn't make sense for the bird to go from hotel to hotel, and you're wasting your energy. You're burdened by the bird as well. You know, they have way, way tougher issues on their mind than a bird, and it's kind of sad because they are supposed to be responsible for the bird, but at the same time, you can't judge them because they have so much more going on in their life, and this cannot be a priority for them because she has 3 kids. You know, she has to do what's right for the kids.
Well, that makes sense. Do you think each bird has its own personality? No matter whether, like, take 3 African grays.
Yeah.
Do you think they each have their own
Every
personality?
single one has their own personality. It's like, even me, I have kids. They're not even a year apart. They're 2 different people. They're totally different. Totally different in every way you can imagine, right? Same thing with birds. You'll have an African gray who's friendly, another one who's friendly but likes to joke. You have another one who's more of a jerk, you know? You have so many different personalities across different birds, you know? You could say, I don't know, as a general statement that cockatoos are fun, right? They're very energetic, right? That's not true for all of them. Some of them are like lazy. Some of them have a tired personality. Some of them are introverts. Some of them are extroverts. It's totally different.
Right. Just depends on the bird.
Exactly.
So what's your normal protocol for when someone is interested in owning a bird?
We have an application online that they have to fill out. We need information about them. But it's not even just about making sure it's a good home, because that's one question. There's another question is the bird that you're interested in actually a good fit for you? For example, I know Scooby likes a house that has a lot of people in it, right?
Right.
So if somebody comes over and it's a not an older person, but like somebody who just wants companionship, you know, and it's just them in their house, they're single, I would tell them, listen, I know you really want an African gray, but I would shy away from Scooby simply because he needs a loud house. And also the opposite is true. Some people have a huge house. Some people have 5 kids. Doesn't mean they can't have a parrot. It just means that the parrot needs to be one that's okay with the house it is. If the bird is an introvert and doesn't like all this noise, it's not going to be a good environment for him.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Planning ahead.
Exactly.
So do you follow up with those who adopt a bird to see how they're doing? I'm pretty sure you do.
Yeah, very often, very often. We've had some bad situations. I've had somebody adopt a bird, and less than a week later, she sold it on Craigslist. Terrible, terrible,
Wow.
terrible. And this was one of the best parrots we've ever had. I was thinking about making her our mascot. Everywhere we would go, I'd go to like school events or nursing homes. She was the star of the show. You know, I didn't even have to do any talking because she does everything for me. I can like sit back, relax, and not like feel under pressure. But this lady, and I knew it wasn't going to be a good home too. I knew it. I had a feeling. She was describing her house. Oh, we have this, we have that. And that's another thing. You can try vetting the person as much as you want. It's not always true.
Right.
But I had a feeling, you know, somebody smells like cigarettes, right?
Right.
I have a feeling, right? Her kids don't look like they're taken care of, right?
Right.
She's talking nicely to me like this, and then she's turning on to her kids, and she like has this. I'm like, you have 2 different faces.
Right. That's
So I had a feeling, but she kept nagging me, and she would call me, she would text me, she would get in touch with through Facebook, and I was like, okay, you know what? You want to adopt a bird? Go ahead. But I want you to understand that this is a cockatoo, and they can have medical expenses. Tia just passed an egg incorrectly, right? That was an expensive operation. I told her, do you think you can afford it? She sends me her bank statements to show me how much she's making. She's making $30,000 a month. Wow. Wow, it's very, very hard to believe, right?
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it at the time. I'm like, okay, send her. Why would somebody send me their bank statements? Like, unless she wants to prove, I can take care of this bird.
Right.
I'm like, okay, we'll do it. I get a call, maybe 3 weeks later, from some lady. She says, hi, I have a bird here that I just bought from someone, and I think she came from you. I'm like, really? So apparently she took this bird. A few weeks later, she decided to just sell it. She put it on Craigslist. She sold it.
Wow.
And the lady told me, I'm glad this lady bought her, by the way, because this lady, goodness gracious, I cannot thank her for enough. She is providing Zoe with the best home I can possibly imagine. She's like the perfect candidate for adoption. She sends me pictures all the time. I was just texting with her yesterday. So I'm glad she's in a good home now.
Yeah.
But
sounds like it worked out for the better. But
she told me that when she went to this woman's home, first of all, it was a mobile home. It was not even a nice one. It was very trashed up. It smelled like cigarettes. She said she took her and Zoe smelled like cigarettes. It was just seeping out of her.
wow.
And the lady says that she needed money for groceries.
Are there situations where you follow up on someone and you have to get involved and get the bird back because you don't like what's going on?
Well, I'll tell you. Fortunately, when we adopt birds out, we build a very good connection with the person who's adopting.
Cool.
Right? It's not you buy, you're gone forever.
Right.
People text me all the time. Food advice, behavior advice. If they have I tell them all the time. People are like, hey, if the bird isn't acting well, should I just surrender the bird? I say, listen. Let's get down to why it's not acting correctly.
Right.
What is causing the behavioral issues? And I'm telling you, we have so many people like reach out. They're like, the bird just bit my wife. She bites everyone. She's upset now. She doesn't like where she is. And I say, let's figure out why the bird doesn't like where it is now. Right? And I can't tell you. I usually tell people wait a week to see the difference. After we implement the tips I give them. But I'm telling you, within 2 days, 90% of them are like totally resolved.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that is probably part of your protocol then. If somebody has a bird
Mm-hmm.
and they want to give it up for adoption, you try to work with them first. Somebody calls you, I got a bird.
Mm-hmm.
Will you guys take it? Do you try to work with them and say, well, wait a minute, before we take it, let's see what's going on?
Oh yes, exactly.
And then maybe you can fix it, and
Exactly.
maybe you won't have
No,
to.
absolutely. Every time I had somebody who contacted me months and months and months later, and he's spilling his anger out. He's telling me this bird, this, that. It's not what you described. It went from being playful and now it doesn't even come out of its cage. I say, listen, why did you wait so long to call me? For real. Why did you reach out to me the moment this happened? And we could have not had months and months and months of this bird hating its home.
Right.
Reach out to me right away, no problem. I'm a phone call away.
Right, that's true. Wow.
We're able to have this because my whole family knows about birds. My whole family takes care of them. We're a family rescue, right?
That's awesome.
This is something that we're able to do. If it was just me doing this on my own, I could not have this many birds because I could not take care of them. I know that.
Right.
So for anybody who wants to adopt parrots, do it, but in a healthy way.
Right. Go ahead and give a plug to your, to Valleywide Parrot Rescue. I know it's ValleywideParrotRescue.com, 520-477-1191. So for anybody out there that sees this,
Yeah.
hopefully.
If you're looking to adopt and you want to actually, instead of, getting a baby and, just having something fun around, if you want to do something really important, really that changes the life of a bird that actually needs a home right now, reach out to us. These guys are all always looking for homes.